here today. Panelists to my right, your left, they're each going to speak on the matter for 5 minutes apiece, and then we're going to flip it to my left, your right, and each one of these panelists will speak to the issue on 10 minutes apiece. And then that should leave us with about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I think it's in the best interest to allow each and every one of these individuals to introduce and you know, give their own reflection of who they are, where they are with this issue. But Howard is with NCADA or NCADA. Pat Dolan is with the County Council. They've done some great work on this matter in the past year. Don Willey, most of us know him as business manager of Labor's Local 110, has his own personal story related to this topic. And moving to my left, we have Dr. Gufaro. He's an expert in this area, as well as Robert. You know, is a recovering addict, runs a very successful clinic, and Percy as well. And they all have their own bent to it. So from what I've learned in this past year, there's not one magic elixir. There's not one silver bullet. And so that's why we have this eclectic mix of opinions and comments that are come from these individuals, these distinguished individuals that have been in the trenches with this very important matter. So I'm going to turn it over to Howard. Please come on up and let's hear from you. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Howard Wiseman. I'm the Executive Director at NCADA. Our mission there is to reduce and actually prevent the harms associated with the misuse of alcohol and other drugs. We do that primarily through education. We're sort of quietly the area's largest provider of universal school-based substance use prevention. We also engage in a little bit of intervention and advocacy. You may be familiar with our agency because we're the culprit for having run 2 ads during the last 2 Super Bowls that addressed the heroin epidemic that we're facing today. And I've been asked to sort of come and kind of frame the remarks you will hear later this morning. And I'd like to do that just sort of by analogy. I was thinking about it. I was driving here, cold winter day. Imagine you're just kind of going down the highway and the car ahead of you hits a patch of ice and the driver doesn't handle the skid particularly well, and the car starts sliding sideways and goes off the side of the road and flips over and catches fire. And you're a little further on down the road, you can see this out of the corner of your eye, and what do? Well, you know, this heroin, this opioid epidemic, it's a little bit like that burning car at the side of the road. But it's not just one car. It's not just a couple of cars. Since 2007, we've lost almost 4,000 people, most of them young. That's the equivalent of about 100 full yellow school buses flipping over, leaving the roadway, and catching fire. So what's the solution? Because while we've seen this increase since 2007, for years, people just kind of kept on driving, didn't even notice. Now, the last couple of years, we've been talking about it. People definitely notice there's cars burning on the side of the road, but still, too many of us just keep on driving. It's not my problem. It's not going to happen to me. It won't happen to my kid. But now, everybody in this room has either been affected by this epidemic, or I'll bet you know somebody who's been affected by this. So what's the solution? Do you lower the speed limit and put more police on the road to enforce it so cars don't skid? Well, if you talk to people in law enforcement, they'll all tell you exactly the same thing. When you ask them about the heroin problem, they'll all say we're never going to arrest our way out of this problem. But when you talk to people in the treatment field, even though treatment works, and even though we need more treatment because 9 out of 10 people who need it don't get it, treatment professionals will say, we're never going to treat our way out of this problem. So if you're not going to treat your way out, and we're not going to arrest our way out of the problem, it does seem to me that we need an even greater commitment to broad prevention for kids, to intervene further upstream before kids are even thinking about using alcohol or marijuana, which tend to be the 2 largest gateways to later problems with opioids and heroin. So ours is the agency that is engaged in prevention. We sort of spread the rock salt. We start with young kids and we try to change attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors so they're less likely when they get older to drive in a risky fashion. We provide the driver's education so if they do hit a patch of ice, they're more likely to steer out of a skid. But prevention is not the whole thing. It's part of a much bigger problem. Because once it takes root, addiction is a cunning disease. It's a disease that no one chooses, and it's something that you would not wish on your worst enemy. But recovery is possible. It's all around you. There's millions of people who are living a life of recovery. Treatment works, prevention works, and what you're going to hear this morning, you're going to hear certainly about one of those horrible, unhappy endings, but you're also going to hear of people and programs and approaches that will eventually rein in this epidemic. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Howard. Now I'd like to introduce the former chair of the St. Louis County Council, Pat Dolan, a dear friend of mine.
Thanks, Dr. Gall. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Patrick Mulcahy is my assistant. I'm very technically challenged. He's probably going to have to help me here. Well, the reason I'm up here is because I'm an elected official in St. Louis County, and basically we had to step forward and try to do something to stop this problem. With the strong support of the county executive, Steve Stanger, and Councilman Sam Page, who's Dr. Sam Page, who kind of led the way on this bill. We decided as a health preventative measure for St. Louis County to go ahead and enact our own PDMP simply because the state of Missouri won't do it. It's just, well, my own personal opinion is it's embarrassing that we had to do it, but we're doing it, and we're having other municipalities. St. Louis City has joined us since. St. Charles County has joined us. There's talks with Columbia. There's talks with Kansas City. We have different groups. I know Robert Riley approached me about it, and Howard's group, and there's a lot of people involved in the county who want to see this get through, and so that's why we took it upon ourselves to go ahead and do this. So as you can see on the screen, PDMPs, as most people know, are a prescription drug monitoring program. St. Louis County was basically known, still is, maybe not anymore because we have passed this. We haven't implemented the program yet, but the word is out. The pill shopping capital, not only of the state, we have the distinction of being the capital of the country, and there's even been people from out of our country come here to buy prescription pills and take them back to wherever they're coming from. We've had people coming in vans, people flown in from California to spend a day or two pill shopping and go back and sell the pills. We had a pharmacist in Fenton that was filmed and documented people lined up on a Saturday morning outside of his office getting prescriptions filled and going on and filling their little grocery bags and taking them home to wherever they're coming from. So it's, you know, like I say, it leads on, and these gentlemen will speak to that, the problem with opioids, but we just couldn't stand back and watch that anymore. So the need is there. There's no question about that. Obviously, like I said, Dr. Kahn with the health department has been on board with this. The police department, who I will mention, the county police and a lot of the other municipalities, state patrol, nobody has access to this information. They don't even want it. The police will tell you, we don't want the access, our name's not on this. For the county police or any other police department to get access, they have to get a court order from a judge to get information from this database. So it's totally private. That's one of the stances are, I won't say opponent, but Senator Schaaf has against it, saying it's a privacy issue, but the privacy concerns have been met. When 49 states have passed some form of this legislation, we haven't. I have a feeling they might know something that we don't know. I mean, so as far as that's concerned, we have bipartisan support in the U.S. Senate and Congress, a lot of bipartisan support throughout the state of Missouri, and hopefully we're going to be able to do something about that. But like I said, Senator Schaaf from St. Joseph has led the charge against this, and we're going to do what we can to address that. Like I mentioned, security, it's a database. If St. Charles County, St. Louis City will all be on the same database. So it'll be handled in St. Louis County. There is a fee. The county will get the money. We put out a certain amount of money, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to get some funding, federal funding, to support this program. It's pretty cost prohibitive, really. I mean, there is no cost if we're saving. If you save any lives at all, it's worth the cost. There isn't any, so that's not so much an issue. Our goals, obviously, opioids are the gateway to other drugs, and as everybody's going to talk to, that is a problem. The decreases are substantiated in other states. We've done the research. This isn't something that's just a philosophical approach. That there are numbers behind us to prove that this does work. When you stop the opioids, that leads to other addictions. So, like I was saying, with Dr. Page's ability to speak with the medical professionals, we have full support of the medical community, law enforcement, like I say, a lot of legislative support. It was just something we had to do. The county executive felt very strongly about supporting this. Hopefully anybody here can talk to their local representatives and see if they can try to talk some sense into some of these people. I mean, it's the county, we can only do certain things sometimes, and we get, as far as legislation for the whole county, really we haven't had any pushback in St. Louis County or the surrounding counties or actually the city of St. Louis. So hopefully all we can ask of you is to contact your representatives and have your memberships or your employees, if they feel so inclined, to maybe send a letter to your state rep or Congress or senator, and hopefully we can get this passed in the state of Missouri. So thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Pat's being very kind about this issue, and most of you know out there that I'm pretty raw about my feelings, and I'd have to say that I would like to add something to his presentation. The senator who was out of St. Joseph, Missouri area, by the way, has 2 letters behind his name, MD, as in medical doctor. It's a disgrace that someone who takes the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm would be quoted in the New York Times to say, let those druggies kill themselves, it'll clean up the gene pool. I don't think we should, as human beings, as a race, should allow people like that to represent us in government. That's disgraceful. Now, to turn to a more personal note, I'm going to introduce Don Willie, a longtime friend of mine. We went to high school together back in the mid-'70s, and he's going to give you his views and obviously his personal story on this matter. Don?
Well, good morning. I'm the life story part of this segment. Life is good, but it's not always easy. I want to thank Tom, Director of St. Louis Construction Forum, and Dr. John Gall for having the courage to talk about this epidemic. I also want to thank all the presenters, vendors, attendees here to share their knowledge and experiences in dealing with this epidemic. I've never been to a group seminar or a conference on heroin where I didn't come away with something positive. And thank you, all of you, for having the courage to fight the stigma of addiction and mental illness, for being here today. As I share my personal story, I don't want you to think of an addicted employee working at the office or the job site. Think of an employee dealing with a loved one on a daily basis with this addiction. My personal story and loss is my son Matt. And I'm learning that my recovery process is grief. And I'm quickly figuring out that I may not recover from grief, but I can learn to live with it if I embrace it and let it run its course. I find I am dealing with Matt in his death as much or more as I did in his heroin-addicted life. It's like a box of chocolates. On March 29th of this year, Matthew David Willie passed after a heroin and benzos overdose. But it wasn't that clean and easy. 7 days prior, I got a call from the chaplain at the ICU of St. Louis U Hospital. I then called Matt's mother in Florida. Matt went at least 15 to 20 minutes without oxygen to the brain before the skilled paramedics brought him back. The next 7 days were spent saying goodbye and reassuring the fine doctors at SLU that Matt would not want to live on life support. After last rites and the tubes were removed, for more than 7 hours he breathed on his own. The morphine used to ease his pain could have put an elephant down. That's the choice that Mom and Dad had to make for Matt. Matt and I talked about this reality many times. On a side note, my nephew, Matt's cousin, Sam Benz, passed away the morning after that his mom and I had to take Matt off of life support. Sam had come to see Matt and say goodbye the day before we took him off support. Sam was a recovering addict. He couldn't even enter the room to see my son and say goodbye because he was struggling that hard with it. Before he left the hospital that night, I told him, don't honor your cousin's death by doing something stupid. Well, he went home that next, the morning we get done pulling my son off of life support, I get the call that morning that he died on his mother's couch of a heroin overdose. So this next part, the life story, the hard part of it here is the eulogy I'm going to share with you. On behalf of the Willies, the Nesbitts, the Beemans, the Abbey-Harts, the Seidlers, I want to thank you all for your prayers, love, and support. For 15 years, I've been halfway to this day. Sorrow is greater than I could have imagined. My love for Matt is stronger than yesterday, and it will continue to grow. I have him in my heart, my mind, and between God and I, he won't get away this time. I want to share you a little bit of what it's like to have a heroin addict in the family. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. In 1976, I had my one and only experience with opium. I was a student at the University of Iowa, heading to Cedar Rapids with my teammates Phil and Ben and our dates. 3 Iowa football players were going to see the ice capades. You know what a true motivation was. Along the way, Ben lit up a joint laced with opium. It tasted so sweet and smooth. The opium was so wonderful. It felt warm and fuzzy, and all anxieties were washed away. The ice show was beautiful. The world was perfect. This experience was like no other. When I came down from this high, I was frightened by this drug. I told Ben I never wanted the opium around me again. This incident gave me a small understanding to the attraction of heroin. And by the grace of God at that time, I had the skills to know that opium was a complete and total lie. It was a completely one-sided experience, void of any reality, and a perfect poison for the vulnerable and unsuspected. And the cure for this poison is so often unfair. I'm a yin and yang kind of guy. From death comes life, from pain and suffering comes growth and strength. I try to look for the good in all things. Don't always see it right away, but with patience, work, and insight, it usually comes. I picked up a lot of skills and insight from emotional illness and addiction through 12 years of working a 12-step program called Emotions Anonymous that have helped me in my struggle with Matt. Matt has not shaken my faith in God. He has challenged me to make it stronger. Faith, as the dictionary would have it, is a belief not based on logical proof or material evidence. A lot of my faith in God I attribute to Albert Einstein. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. If Albert believed in God, I will set my faith in God also, because I'm sure Einstein pondered this mystery far deeper than I ever could. I believe we're all made in the image of God, and that all lives deserve respect. And yes, I know I'm a hypocrite, but I choose to struggle with this one. Matthew liked camping, history, music, the Cardinals. He was always pimping me for tickets. Matt had a big heart for humanity as a child, and as a heroin addict, he wanted to be with people whenever possible. He didn't like being alone. The feeling of shame and loneliness are very powerful and frightful emotions, and they had a tight hold on Matt. He didn't have the skills to beat the lies of loneliness and shame. Because in reality, he wasn't alone, he was loved, but he was too sick to see it. Fear of these emotions kept him running back to the lie. In later years, I watched him turn his love for people into manipulation to feed the addiction. A heroin addict will lie to themselves and anyone to escape to the lie of heroin. We have lost wedding bands, watches, cash, power tools. All these things mean so little now. In the past 15 years, Matt has been jailed or in prison 50% of the time. You could sleep well knowing the lie was hopefully out of his reach in prison. Matt has been in rehabs from 14 days to 30 days and 3-day dryouts. He's had counseling, therapy, and the drug to block the effects of the lie. I use hard love, soft love. The bar could wear you down and make you feel how powerless you are as a parent. Aaron and the guys at the recovery house tried their best to pull Matt in out of the darkness, and I want to thank them for their efforts. I believe recovering addicts have the best chance to save an addict, and I hope you will see fit to support their work. These are the guys who are the miners that keep going back into the mine to save the canary. Go to projecthopestlouis.com or check out archwayinstitute.org online to help them in our fight against mental illness and drug abuse. I also want to recognize Joe Brennan, a 110 laborer that works with the Harris House and it runs a support group for parents of addicts on Monday nights at St. Anthony's Hospital, the Highland House. As a parent, you sometimes feel guilty that you didn't file bankruptcy a few times trying to save your son. Matthew would never admit he was powerless over alcohol and heroin. He never got a good foothold in a 12-step program. You have to protect your family and loved ones from a heroin addict because they will search out someone with poor life skills or another addict and they can destroy your family quickly. Matt and I would talk on the phone or meet about every 2 weeks. He always wanted something of value, and he made me think, am I funding his last fix? I would use this time to measure his condition and try to bring him into the light. Dealing with a heroin addict is like fighting underwater with an octopus. You have to come up for air to fight another day. Over the last few years, when people would ask about my kids, I would say Nikki is doing this, my daughter Laura is doing that, and Matt struggles with life. He's a heroin addict. Matt didn't like the honesty, but if I could admit his addiction, how could I expect him to? And it was only right to make people aware. I choose not to blame the last player who missed a shot in the game to win the game. The sum total of a life can be changed at any point by making a better choice. In the past and the last week, I have asked Matt for forgiveness, and he has forgiven me as I have him. I will not let the pain resentment offers to drag me down. I am asking for forgiveness requires honesty and fearlessness because you can't control the outcome. I know there might be people in this church that Matt is wrong, and on his behalf, I ask you to forgive him and myself for our shortcomings. Matthew David Willie, your dad, your mom, your family and friends will love you forever. I hope you don't have to go there. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Now we'll hear from Dr. Jufra. He is with Clayton Behavioral. Please, Luis.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here and humbled to follow Mr. Wiley's testimony. I'll try to be as brief as possible. try to be as brief as possible. I think a lot has been said already about raising awareness. We have an epidemic, and the deaths continue to accumulate, and I think a lot has been said about that. So the question is, how do we stop an epidemic? So I thought I'll come up with a few examples from history. For example, clean water helped epidemics. This is a chart that shows the number of deaths dropping significantly after clean water is introduced, chlorination is introduced, and therefore the cases of typhoid fever dramatically decrease. Vaccines stop epidemics. Here you see what happens with polio, the Salk vaccine, when it was introduced, and a subsequent vaccine, and then you see the number of cases of poliomyelitis drastically decreasing. Antibiotics stop epidemics. You see here what happened with the number of deaths from pneumonia when sulfas were introduced and then penicillin was introduced. Dramatic decreases. Other drugs like antiparasites, they also reduce epidemic. You see the number of deaths from malaria rapidly drawing with the introducing of anti-malarial agents. So epidemics can be stopped. Can we stop the opioid epidemic, the death epidemic? Well, it's been done elsewhere. Here you have a slide of how France approached the overdose epidemic. And they introduced a medication that the World Health Organization calls an essential medication. And you see a rise in the number of patients that received buprenorphine, closely followed by a dramatic decrease in the number of deaths by overdoses. That's not only happened in France, because European countries have also been dealing with this problem. It happened in Baltimore, where deaths were dramatically decreased by 66% by aggressively introducing buprenorphine. So buprenorphine is a medication that can save lives, saves lives, and the data that it works is just overwhelming. We have not found a better way to stop deaths. Why don't we use it? Turns out that our treatment system is heavily biased against using these medications, and is heavily biased towards using interventions that add little to the care of a patient. You will say, well, why don't we just give buprenorphine to everybody? Well, it's not that easy, because if you offer buprenorphine to addicts, many of them won't want to take it. They will sell it. They'll cheat on taking buprenorphine. They may not be ready to take it. But once you have a patient that takes it, and once you have them stabilized on buprenorphine, the data is overwhelming that the longer you keep them on buprenorphine, the higher their chances of succeeding. The longer they stay on buprenorphine, the higher the chances of staying alive. This very heavy slide has one conclusion. Once a patient is stabilized on buprenorphine or on methadone, another highly stigmatized medications, once they're stabilized on those two, making them go to groups, go to rehab, see a counselor adds zero to their chances of recovery. All those psychosocial interventions are essential to get the patient started on the medications, understand the illness, understand that it's not an episodic illness, but a chronic lifelong illness that needs chronic long-term treatment. But once they're there, the more obstacles we put to keep them on buprenorphine, the more we make it more and more likely that they'll succumb to the illness. Why don't we do what works? Many arguments against buprenorphine. Oh, it saves lives. Some people say, well, patients need to choose what they have, how they want to be treated. And I said, sure, but give them all the data. If you tell a patient, what do you want to do? Be clean of all drugs, or be hooked on buprenorphine and change one drug for another. That stigmatizing language will make the patient say, well, I want to be clean for all drugs. Well, what are the odds of staying alive if your goal is to be clean for all drugs? And what are your odds of staying alive if you stay on these medications? So I just put a few examples of why the treatment community may not be embracing the treatment that works the best. So we all have to ask ourselves, why are we so biased against data? I jokingly tell my students, Missouri is the show me state. We should always ask for evidence. If we send patients 30 days to treatment programs that will give them acupuncture, equine therapy, hypnotherapy, massages, tai chi, cognitive Community Fair. I mean, it doesn't work. Why do we keep doing the same? It's just, it's appalling that we don't incorporate the data. For cancer, for heart disease, for hypertension, we eagerly seek studies that guide us and tell us, how do we treat this? The treatment community, unfortunately, not all, of course, but too many in the treatment community follow their opinions and biases and not the data. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So the next presenter, next panelist is Robert Riley. Pat introduced me to Robert several months ago. He's doing some really great work in the community, and I'd like for him to come up and tell his brief story.
Good morning. I'll make this really brief. So I have a unique position up here. I'm an addiction counselor at Clayton Behavioral. I'm also the co-founder of a couple of organizations, the Missouri Network for Opiate Reform and Recovery, also known as MO Network, Missouri Safe Project, which is syringe access for everyone. It's a clean needle exchange initiative, and I'm also a person in long-term recovery. I recently celebrated September 6th was my 10-year anniversary being free from drugs and alcohol. Thank you. I'll take it because it's kind of a big deal for a guy like me. I didn't have anything prepared. I just want to come up here. I want to thank everybody for having me up here. You know, at Missouri Network, my best friend Chad Sabora and I were just a couple of guys in recovery about 4 years ago. Other addicts, heroin addicts, were coming to us and saying, I can't find a job, I can't get housing, how do I detox, where can I find treatment with no insurance, just all these like real life scenarios. And we just started helping people. And next thing you know, we had we started a nonprofit. We don't go after huge donations. It's really funded by the families that come to us for help. We have a little outreach center over in South St. Louis on Broadway, 4022 South Broadway, where we have family support group meetings. We have addicts that stop in throughout the day for clean needles, for Narcan, for food and drink, water. And sometimes just for somebody to listen to them or point them in the right direction. And so that's what we do at that organization. We've been involved the last few years to, you know, one of the things Chad and I try to do is we try to really humanize this. People have always stigmatized addicts based upon the symptoms that they see, right? Lying, stealing, cheating, all the horrible things that we see. I just watched the news this morning and there was a video of parents with their 11-month-old baby and they're passed out at a red light with the car running. And you'll probably see it on the news when you go home tonight. And it's terrible. Those are terrible stories. But what I want you to know is we need to start looking at this for the medical condition that it is. And their brains are hijacked. There's no way that those parents wanted to put their child in danger. But their body physically was telling them before they do anything else today, before they eat, sleep, reproduce, take a breath, they need to go put opiates into their system. That's what their brains are telling them. Their brains are hijacked. I speak at about 22 area schools also, and I do a lot of presentations. What we try to do is we try to do awareness within the community. We try to educate the young kids. Our young kids are exposed to so many more dangerous things today. Do you know that your kids can actually go online and order heroin and have it delivered directly to your mailbox? And it'll come in a box that says Nintendo on it, and you're thinking that they got a new controller or a new game, but it's actually heroin. Do you know that the marijuana out there today is like 4 times more potent than anything back in my day? So our kids are exposed to so many more dangerous substances than we ever were. And you know what we're doing because of our society? Everybody's working, everybody's on the go. we're not able to pay the attention that we need to these dangerous scenarios that they're in. So here's 3 most dangerous words you can say. Anybody can say. Not my kid. But I'm going to add this for you particularly. Not my foreman, not my employee, not my wife, not my husband, not my mom, not my daughter, not my son. Those are the 3 most dangerous words you can say. Because I come in contact with judges, lawyers, doctors, moms, grandmas, daughters, husbands, foremans, business owners. This does not discriminate. It hijacks the brain. There's an estimated 2 million people addicted to prescription opiates in the United States right now, and only roughly 450,000 people addicted to heroin. It starts with the prescription pain pills. And that's what we need to educate our community on, is the dangers of them. So I support, I want to thank Councilman Pat Dolan for the work he did in the county. We passed Narcan laws in the last year. We're really, my organization, myself and Chad are really coming at this from a harm reduction. We just want to save lives. I can't get them into treatment if they're dead. I can't help them find a job. I can't help them find an apartment. I can't help them, give them a ride to their family's house on Thanksgiving if they're dead. And thanks for letting me come out here.
This topic has been something that I think we heard earlier, a number of us, as Howard put it, have been driving by the school buses on fire on the side of the highway. If you do some soul searching, it doesn't take long, to dispel that old rumor of Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees of separation. I think you'll find, if you're honest with yourself, it's 1, maybe 2 degrees. I myself, my coworkers, 4 of my coworkers have lost children, either a son or a daughter, to either opioids or heroin. It's high time that we really look at ourselves and say, is this what we want as a nation? We can do better. So the next person we're going to bring up is Percy from ARCA, and listen to his comments. Please, Percy.
I came into this field quite differently. I'm a pharmacist by training, didn't know anything about addiction, and I worked for a company that developed the medication that we talk about all the time these days called Narcan. You all heard about Narcan, the lifesaver? That was the medication developed by my company about almost 40 years ago. My job was to train physicians how to use it. Based on the neurobiology of addiction, we found there are different medications could be developed. Without going into all the details, some of the most effective medication, non-opiates, were developed by the company I used to work for, the pharmaceutical division of DuPont. And the hostility that I encountered was unbelievable. So about 15 years ago, I left the industry. I said, this is my calling. I'm on a mission to standardize the treatment of drug addiction, bring it down to the level where people can receive treatment no different than somebody going to a physician to treat their hypertension or diabetes or any other condition. Why is it that we stigmatize the disease? Not one single patient has ever come to me and said, my goal in life was to be a drug addict. I tell people, drug addiction always happens accidentally. Nobody plans it. If we can bring evidence-based treatment, what Dr. Jufra talked about and others are saying, we can make a huge difference. The big difference with addiction is that when somebody gets addicted, humans are created to thrive. We all are created to thrive. Addiction throws the patient into a survival mode. And nothing is more detrimental to a human being than to be in a survival mode. So when these people are in survival mode, anything goes. Lying, cheating, stealing, selling their bodies, everything is okay because I'm here to survive. And just like homelessness cannot be treated by just sending a patient to a food pantry or to a soup kitchen or giving them a blanket, the treatment has to occur where they are taken away from the survival, they're taken back from the survival mode, back into a thriving mode. And that takes a whole range of services. I opened the clinic based on what I learned from some of the top researchers in the country. I opened the clinic about 16 years ago, and now I treat close to 500 patients a month, starting from CEOs of companies to people from the street. The treatment is no different. Offer them treatment. What are the ingredients of effective treatment? Same-day service. By the time they come to us, the addiction is a very small component. What they have is what I call Humpty Dumpty. They have serious issues, legal issues, medical issues, financial issues, marital issues. And if you don't treat each of the symptoms, you just lose the patient. The challenge today is that, as Dr. Jufra said, that every major addiction in the past was curtailed, was stopped by preventing, in medicine we call it vector, the factor that contributes to that. Those of you who can think about Quaaludes, it was a huge problem in the 60s and 70s. How did they stop Quaaludes? Cut off the precursor chemical. It stopped. We had a huge problem with cocaine addiction. What did they do? They put pressure on the 3 cocaine-producing nations. They stopped that. During the Nixon administration, Nixon put pressure on the French and they stopped the importation of heroin. And a lot of we were able to successfully treat it. Today the problem is that we have no strategy in place how to curb the supply of heroin coming in. This country uses 90 metric tons of hydrocodone a year. That is 80% of the world's hydrocodone is used right here. So we have prescription pain meds, we have heroin coming in, and the treatment is also done by opiates that are effective, but they're also leaking into the market, into the being diverted. How in the world can we treat them? That's why this is not surprising, what you saw today in today's paper. The death toll has now reached 30,000 people, 30,000 people, and there is no end in sight. And the paradox of this treatment of opiate addiction is that we know how it enters the brain. We, for instance, do not know how meth enters the brain. We do not know how cocaine enters the brain. But opiates, we know exactly how it enters the brain. And yet we are failing in our treatment because we are hopelessly divided in which way to take. This is like almost like theologians fighting as to how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. We have to put aside our differences, open treatment clinics, mobilize the resources we have. Tell physicians that please get the DEA exemption to use a drug like Suboxone. Learn about it. Learn about naltrexone. Learn about Vivitrol. And only by educating ourselves, getting all those prejudices that we have about that drug addicts are bad people, will be able to succeed. We have done that here. 400 patients a month, that's a staggering number. Yes, we lose some, it's very frustrating, but you cannot give up on them. Addiction is a very treatable illness. We have effective medications. All we need to is, as employers, as owners of businesses, you have an incredible opportunity to learn about it. We see people who know nothing about addiction. All they think these are bad people. If you can learn about the treatment options, see what is effective, come up with the ingredients of treatment, you will succeed. There's a lot of information that's on that we have at the ARCA table, and I'll be happy to meet with you. Not because what I'm doing is patented or copyrighted. Anybody can use these protocols. This is nothing secret. There's no secret ingredient here. All you need is a passion to help people and a healthy dose of compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, Percy. I know we're pushing the time limit, so why don't we jump right into the Q&A. Tom Finan has the mic. Please raise your hand, identify who you are, and also identify who you're directing your question to up here on the panel. Over here, Tom.
Hi, I'm John Perkowski, and I'm with ISC Contracting, and I have more of a comment for the panel than I do more of a question. I've seen alcohol and drug addiction, what it does to a family, deaths from it my entire life. It's just part of what's around us. We can either open our eyes and see it, or we can just take our own path. I'm involved in aftercare with addicts and alcoholism also. Now, my thing for the panel is there's this whole thing that you guys got, I back it 100%, of the opiates. But I have a loved one who was a part of a medical study and has hypersensitivity to just about anything. And opiates is the only thing that keeps the chronic pain away. And to get this person to keep the chronic pain out, that they need understanding from the medical community of what it takes for them. There are special circumstances that this can be done. And that's a message that I try to get out to the medical community. Believe me, I know firsthand the damage of what addictions does. And I could go over stories and stories. It's just that if the medical community needs to know that there are exceptions to the rule. And with that, I'll pass it.
I'd like to respond to that just briefly, because it gets to the question of how did we get here? And one of the ways we got here is through the the transition in the medical community about how aggressively to treat pain, treating it as a so-called fifth vital sign. But I'm going to lay a lot of responsibility for this at one bad actor's feet, and that is Purdue Pharma, which is the manufacturer of OxyContin, aggressively marketed their product as safe and non-addictive. That led the other manufacturers of other opioids to follow suit, and that contributed to the dramatic overprescription of opioids. Opioids are wonderful drugs in certain circumstances. And as the CDC guidelines about prescribing patterns have come out recently, they should be used for a short period of time, last resort, but for cases that don't respond to other medications, they're there, but they should be there as a last resort, not a first resort.
Thank you, Howard and John. I want to remind the audience, if you can grab today's Wall Street Journal, there's a good book review in there. You might want to take a look at that book review and pursue that book with regards to this whole issue of doctors overprescribing opioids and things of that nature. Any other questions or comments from the audience?
Yeah, my name is Keith Taylor. I'm with the car. We keep talking about opiates, and they're tied with painkillers. But we've got a large group of our society, all these millennials, the addicts, and their younger kids that I think they're getting overprescribed with Adderall, Ritalin, and other drugs out there that, just like we were talking, the marijuana that's so addictive now. These young little guys, as early as second grade, are introduced to mind-altering drugs. Is there any effect that you see that you're seeing more young people going from one drug to another to another?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is a little tricky because when you have a true, I mean, and I wholeheartedly agree that these medications are overprescribed in a way that I call cosmetic psychopharmacology. Everybody wants their kids to do a little better and to get ahead, and therefore they're overprescribed. But I can tell you, those kids who truly have ADD, truly have it, and you don't treat them, it's like asking them to swim with one hand tied behind their back. And one of the main risk factors for addiction is untreated ADD, because those are the kids that are more impulsive, novelty seekers, risk takers. They act before they think. So having said that, we have to find the balance. There are true cases for which these medications can be life-saving, but there is a lot of cosmetic psychopharmacology where kids are just exposed to more and more of these drugs, and they may then cross the line to other drugs for sure.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is to everybody that's here, if you've got young ones that are out there, young boys and girls that are mischievous and they like to have a lot of fun, don't be drugging them up. It's not going to be good.
I couldn't hear the question.
I think there's a lot of young people out there that are being overprescribed with those medications, be it the parent, the school system, or the professional that they're seeing.
Let me just jump in here real quick. So the Surgeon General of the United States just released the first ever report. And in that report, he said that it's estimated 1 in 7 in our population, in this room, 1 in 7 of you will deal with serious substance use issues or alcoholism during your lifetime. So when I speak at high schools, one of the things I do, because really, listen, teenagers are going to argue with you about weed. We're legalizing it everywhere, right? One of the things I tell them is I go through and I count through 1 in 7, and I have them stand up. And I said, there's your drug addicts and there's your alcoholics. And I said, here's the issue. We don't know if you're that 1 in 7. We don't have a test. There is a recent test that just came out where they identified 4 traits that they could, with 80% accuracy, predict substance issues. Those 4 traits are, one is pleasure seeking, sensation seeking, impulsivity, anxiety, and hopelessness. Those are the 4 traits. But I tell them, we don't have a test. I don't have a blood test that can give Dr. Jufer or any of you that's going to say. That's why this crosses all socioeconomic. It doesn't matter about your background. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you have 1 parent in the home, 2 parents, college educated. So when you're smoking that highly, highly potent marijuana, you don't know if you're setting off that 1 in 7. If you're that 1 in 7, and it's going to lead to other substances. And that's where we need to really just educate the kids. Just educate them on the dangers of them. They're going to make the choices. A lot of it's normal choices that they do. Teenagers are running around putting crap in their mouths and staying out late. You kind of got to be the brakes for them and really educate them.
So I would like to say, before we close this out, and I'm going to let Percy get his comment in, I want to make sure that everybody leaves here today not taking this as an event, as a one-time event. We need to open this dialogue and keep this dialogue going. Let me see a show of hands on how many people out there represent a construction company. There's a lot of people out there. How many out there represent labor unions? Show of hands. A lot of people out there. Any owners out there, such as the WashUs, the BJCs, the Amarins, the Anheuser-Busch's. They need to be in on this conversation. We are not going to solve this by ourselves. Sorry, Percy.
I think you should also keep in mind that the major gateway drug is not all we talk about. Certainly there are dangers with Adderall and so on. It's alcohol. I talked about 30,000 people dying from opiate overdose. You know what the figure for alcoholism is? 88,000. And we need to be aware of it because how almost many of the addictive behaviors start with beer or wine and just keeps escalating. And then unfortunately when they do seek help, Many physicians are not adequately treated, so they might give them medications or anti-anxiety medication that can make things worse. We have a big problem with another group of medications called benzodiazepines, called benzos. And drugs like Xanax have become street drugs now. And when you combine drugs like Xanax with alcohol, or Xanax or benzos with opiates, that's a bad combination. So keep in mind, keep a close eye on terms of what happens with the alcohol use and alcohol abuse, because that is the gateway drug.
One last comment before I turn it back over to Joe, our MC. The unique thing about our industry here in St. Louis, the construction industry that is that most of our healthcare plans for the trades workers are jointly trusted by both labor and management. I know Tom Fine is a huge fan of big data. We need to start mining the data that are in those trust funds, health and welfare plans. We need to find ways to overcome some of these addictions that are out there. And I think we have the power and the tools to do that. I think we also need to have a conversation, that's why I'd love to see the owners here, about some of the draconian measures that we have built into our drug testing policies. Isolation, we just heard, is probably the worst enemy of turning someone aside and having them spin off back into their bad habits. We have to solve these problems together. Joe, turn it back over to you. Thank you very much.
Before we go, I just wanted to ask one question. I'd like to see a show of hands from the people that are here today who have either a family member or someone that they're affiliated with that they know from work that has been affected by the issues we've been talking about today. Yeah, it's pretty much everybody. So this is obviously an important topic, and as John said, we need to keep the conversation going so that this epidemic can come to an end. Let's give one last round of applause before we leave for our panelists.